Merry Christmas to all of you. Christmas has been called the most wonderful time of the year, and it definitely can be. But Christmas also, you can say it another way with a question mark. Christmas, the most wonderful time of the year? You're kidding. Now, why would anybody say it that way? Well, I gave you in your notes 4 words that start with the letter F. One is the idea of food. How many like Christmas food? How many like it too much? How many have finances that you're going to use this Christmas? You're going to use finances. And you love people so much. Like the food, you love it so much. It's just one time of the year. You know how much weight you can gain one time of the year if you do it over 10 and 20 years? However, we always lose it in January, don't we? Or if we spend too much in December and you run out of cash, what do you have in your wallet? Credit cards. That really helps out, doesn't it? So you can buy whatever you want because you don't have to pay for it until January. How many love January? Well, Christmas can be a challenge. There are challenges at Christmas like finances and food. But one, it shouldn't be a problem at all, is family. It's a family time. And so family is great, but you know what I spend my life doing in ministry? Dealing with families. Not because they call me and say, Jim, our family is doing such a fantastic job in life. We just want to come and share it with you. That is rare. But I find out that son doesn't like dad and ran away, and other problems. And so then we're going to bring all these memories of the family together at Christmas time. And there's some things that have happened in families that have just destroyed lives. And you're going to bring that all together at Christmas time. It can be a challenge. Christmas can turn into something different than what we had intended. But in your notes, I've given you 4 spots to write down the 4 F's. What's the last one? You may have said by this time, if you're writing down, Jim, you may be a little upset with me because I didn't give you enough space to write that down, and you might be a little frustrated with me. Welcome to Christmas. Have you ever had so many parties to go to in 1 month? It's amazing how many plays, how many productions in school, how many special things can you cram into 1 month of the year? And it's frustrating. You can't get there. My wife was just going through some of the things we were scheduled to do, and I said, you're kidding. And that was my response. How do you choose 3 things at one time? What do? I said, let's just stay home. But frustration can enter into it. So if the challenges of Christmas can be a problem, but how do you solve that? Well, you have Christmas movies. And I like the Hallmark Christmas movies. Pastor Ken talked about them recently. And Glenda and I, we record most of the Hallmark Christmas movies. So what we realize that it's 2 hours for the movie, but the movie takes an hour and a half. So we know that if you just skip all the commercials, and we do. And so we also, if we're not sure about a movie and we're not sure about the actors at the beginning, we will sometimes go to the end to see if we like the ending. Is that cheating? Well, it's being creative, I call it. And it's just one of those things that you can do at Christmas time with movies. But there are some movies, and we have one for our Home Point ministry. We're emphasizing one this Christmas, and that is It's a Wonderful Life. That movie came out on December 25th, 1946. I was 4 months old. It's a 70-year-old film, and it's been around a long time, but it didn't start successfully. In fact, the people who started it went really in the hole. About $500,000 back then was a lot of money. And so they weren't sure what was going to happen with it, but it's stayed, and now it's 70 years old. So it's what they call a classic. It's a tradition. Now, if you're 70 years old, how many are 70 years old or older? Raise your hand. If you're 70 years old, they can't get their hands up real high, but, okay. This means that you're a classic. Most of the classics were in the first service. And they were when they found out they were a classic, they got their hand up higher. But if you last 70 years, you're a classic. I turned classic this year. Great. And so it's a wonderful life. We've got a Home Point has this sheet out there. You can go out to the stand. If nobody's there, just pick one up and take it home. It gives you instructions. Get the movie. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes just to run straight through it. And then watch it as a family. It's giving you some things you can talk about. You can add to that on the back. It gives a film synopsis. But it's one way of helping to have Jesus in your home this Christmas. We'll have some other ways next week at Home Point. We're going to be talking about the red plate, which our families use for years for birthdays. We use the red plate at Christmas for guess who? And we'll share with you some things about that. Also, the Advent wreath. We have an Advent wreath in our home. We use that for Christmas. All these ways of helping Jesus be there, because it can be a most wonderful time of the year in spite of some of those things. But there's always Christmas memories, and some of those memories are very, very special. They are kind of riveted into our life. I was asked by a lady in our church when I was small if she just kind of adopted me. So when I had a birthday or a Christmas, she'd always want to know what I wanted, and she'd give me a gift. Well, that Christmas, I had been wanting a BB gun, but my parents didn't want to buy one for me. Not that I couldn't have it, it's just they didn't want to spend the money. And so I said, well, I think Auntie Vance wants to buy me a BB gun. Can I ask her for it? They said, okay. And Auntie Vance bought me a BB gun for Christmas. And there's another sermon on that story, but I won't go through that now, what happened with the BB gun. But anyway, it was just a memory that's there. And then there's another memory that is just grained upon my heart. It's right there, deep, deep, deep. And that is, I was enjoying life at age 10, having, well, what a 10-year-old does, just as enjoys life. And it was Christmas Eve. And my dad was home from the farm. He was at home that day. My mom was baking cookies. Life couldn't get any better. My 13-year-old was somewhere where I didn't have to see him. And so it was a good morning. And then I heard my dad yelling a word I'll never forget, "Jim, get in here now!" And I went into the house, and the sight I saw, it's right on my heart. I saw my dad carrying my mom, hanging limply, a 37-year-old woman, hanging limply in his arms. She had a massive heart attack and died that day. Christmas Eve, 1956, changed my life. Now again, there's a series of sermons to follow that, but it's just a fact. I'll share more at the close, some things of how I see Christmas Eve now, because it's very impacting in my life. There's a lot of emotion for me around Christmas time, and that was added to the fact that when I grew up and decided to get married and met this gorgeous brunette and married her, and we started having the perfect children. We had perfect child number 1, perfect child number 2. You've met some of them. And then on December 16th, 1977, waiting for perfect child number 3, things changed. The baby stopped moving. It was right the time for birth, almost at the last part of the pregnancy. Baby stopped moving. The doctors confirmed the baby had died. He was delivered on the 16th of December, deceased. Jeremy Stephen Buckley. I've never seen him alive, and yet those are memories that are in my heart. Following year, we gave birth to Daniel Buckley. That was good, but children don't replace children when you lose one. So those are memories, and you have memories, but this message is not about what's happened in the past in your life or my life. It's not about what's happening now, because as we meet today, I don't know what's going on in your life. All I know is sometimes you share with me what's happening in your life, and I appreciate recently we've had individuals share some things they have held for years, and now they're opening up their life, and it's been refreshing for them, but also to know that a reminder that a lot of people hold things in going through tough times. And as a person in ministry for almost 50 years, I've seen a lot of tough times that I didn't know were happening. Now, God has given me a gift, and it can be a curse, and that is I can pretty much read people. I don't know the details. I just look at somebody's face and say, oh, things aren't good. I don't say that to them. I say, oh, you're having a bad day. I see it on your face. What I see is a lot of stuff we carry. How many people recognize Tim Tebow's face? This is a football player. of renown. He had the world by the tail. This is his story. The title of the book is Shaken. It's discovering your true identity in the midst of life's storms. His dream of being a professional football player, a professional quarterback, was granted and then taken away. How do you handle that when you have tremendous disappointment? And that's really, so the question this morning is, it's not, though, about what's happening in the past or happened in the past or even what's happening now. And I don't know what you're facing, but it could be devastating. But you're not going to let anybody know it. But it's really what happened. That's what we want to talk about today. That affects what's happening in your life now or what's happening in your life in the coming days. What happened? And how do you find out what happened at Christmas? Well, you have to go to the Bible because this is Christmas. It's not just holiday, okay? People say, well, just happy holidays. I say Merry Christmas because I'm a Christian. And it's all about the Christ. And so that's what I say, not to make anybody insulted, but that's a Christmas tree. I don't call it a holiday tree. We're having Christmas parties, not holiday parties. So this is a Christian church. So we're going to talk about who? Jesus Christ. And so you have to go to the Bible, and you have to look at the stories of Jesus Christ. They call them the Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And those are the 4 gospel stories of Jesus. And if you're going to tell a story of Jesus, somebody's going to tell about the birth. Well, Matthew did. The first one that's on the list, Matthew, wrote about the birth of Jesus, the angel appearing to Joseph and saying it's okay to take this woman as your wife, even though she's going to have a baby. He knew that he wasn't the father. He was going to put her away, but the Bible story is there. Well, then there's the story about the wise men who came from the east to see this child, and it's a story about King Herod, who was going to kill all the babies baby boys 2 years old and younger because he didn't want another king vying for his authority, and how they left Egypt. That's in Matthew. We go to Mark, we don't have that. There's nothing there about the story of the birth of Jesus. It's a fast-paced gospel, one that kind of puts Matthew and Luke together. And so that's the first 2. And then Luke, as the story of the angel appearing to Mary. That's a great, first 2 chapters are marvelous. And then I love chapter 2 of Luke. It's the Christmas story. In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken to the entire Roman world, and it goes on. It's tremendous, 20 verses. We'll read those on Christmas Eve at our home. You'll hear them here. Great story. So Luke talks about the birth in great ways. And then there's John. Doesn't say a thing about the birth of Jesus. And I smile. Or does he? You know, sometime in life you have to step aside and look at things in a different way. So I'm stepping over here now and looking at you. You look different when I come over here. For some reason, it just changes. In the first service, I went over to this side and I said, I'm going to look at you. And they applauded. They were different. Everything, when you look at people or look at things in life, even looking at a tree, you look at different sides and, and that's how I think we need to look at the Gospel of John, from a different slant. Pastor Kent has chosen to do something very special this Christmas, and that is borrow from somebody else something that they've done something. And the Christmas message, Light of the World, is a borrowed idea from Andy Stanley, who has a great ministry and preacher in Georgia. And so we're going to look at this for about 3 weeks, this Light of the World, from a different viewpoint. John's gospel having anything to say about the birth of Jesus? It's here. But you have to really understand who John is. John the Apostle. Who was this man? John the Apostle was one of the chosen 12. He was also one of the closest followers of Jesus. In fact, in John's gospel, if you read it, he doesn't talk about himself at all. He's not mentioned. He only talks about Jesus. It's a great gospel. He just talks about Jesus. He loved Jesus so much. But he does refer to himself, and when he does, he said, the beloved disciple. It's the disciple that Jesus loved. It sounds like he didn't love the others. Have you ever met somebody who had many first friends? I mean, if you knew him, you'd say you were his best friend. I worked with a man, and I knew I was his best friend. But he had the capacity that many people who knew him knew that they were his best friend. So he passed away, and I was one of the ones chosen to be on the platform for the service. So I took an opportunity. I just said, I want to ask you a question. I know many of us are very close to Doral. And I said, let me just ask you this. If you think and believe you, without a doubt, are Doral's best friend, just raise your hand. And I think over 50 hands went up. It was so classic because I felt the same way. And I knew I was his best friend. And they did too. And he had the ability to make you know and believe you were genuinely his best friend. You say, how could he do that? Well, here's John the Apostle, who calls himself the beloved disciple, the one Jesus loved. What's he saying? He loved me most. And Jesus has that capacity. He died for you on the cross. Nobody loves you more. He loves you like no one else could ever love you. How many of you believe that you are Jesus' best friend? Come on, get your hands up. Somebody's got to believe that, and I do. I believe that he loves me more than anybody else. But the beautiful thing is he loves Steve more than anybody else. And how can one person do that? He's God, understand this. He can do this. So this is John the Apostle, and I'm introducing him to you. He was a man who actually lived longer than the other apostles. Many martyred early. It didn't last long in life. And he lived longer, long enough to be exiled to an island called Patmos. From there, he was given a revelation. He wrote a book called Revelations. Interesting man. But he saw some things. He lived at one of the most terrible times in Jewish history. And during that time, he saw the world turn dark. It was so dark. If you think you have a bad time, just listen to some of the things that John lived through and saw, experienced. Just maybe things aren't going for you well right now, but just understand and listen carefully to some of the things he experienced. First of all, the Romans built an empire that was built on violence and slavery. Now, you may not like our things going on in America now, but violence and slavery from the top down. Just imagine that. People barging in here right now, pulling out your family and friends and torturing them on a cross today for no reason, just because they were here. This was going on. Israel was an enslaved nation. Jews lived under a crazy emperor who launched legions of soldiers on Judea and Jerusalem. John saw and survived unimaginable horror, and the world got darker and darker. He saw and survived Roman legions of soldiers marching through Galilee, hurting those Jewish zealots. Those are the ones who had the swords, and they were going to take apart the Roman army. Well, they couldn't beat them, but they would attack them, and they were herding them back toward Jerusalem. And then finally, they reached Jerusalem, and the battle became a stalemate. But the Jewish people were in the city of Jerusalem. So what did the Roman soldiers do? They, unable to breach the city's defenses, the Roman armies established a permanent camp just outside the city, digging a trench around the circumference of its walls and building a wall as high as the city walls. And people tried to escape, and when they tried to escape, they were captured. And guess what? Your son or your daughter, your neighbor, is placed on a cross and crucified. As many as 500 people a day were crucified and placed on a hill so that everybody in Jerusalem could see it. It was horrible. For 7 months, the people of Jerusalem were left to starve, surrounded by the army of the Romans. Disease broke out, and finally in August of AD 70, Titus breached the outer walls and the city fell. One of the historians of the Jewish people, Josephus, claims that 1.1 million people died under the siege of the Romans, and 97,000 others were captured and enslaved. And John lived to see this. So you know many of his family and friends in Jerusalem died, and he survived this. He's seeing the darkest of darkest of darkest. It is going darker and darker. It's so bad. The destruction of the temple was the final thing. It marked the end of the Jewish world that we know from the Old Testament. And his friends and families was gone. I just, thinking of that, we have 29 members in our family right now. And all of a sudden, if there's only 12 of us left, what a horrible thing to experience. He lived through the darkest of times. The lights were out, just down, down. And so he's inspired by God to write a story about Jesus. What do you say? He's going to write a gospel, and the gospel means good news. How do you write good news in the midst of this travesty, in the midst of this horror? How do you do that? Or I guess even more pertinent, people had bad things going on. How did they survive the bad stuff? What do you do when life comes to an end and you're still alive? It's horrible. And so, not only did he see the world grow dark, but he also saw something very special. And that's the part of the what happened that we want to look at this morning. What happened? How did he not only survive it, but write a gospel, write a story of the life of Jesus? What kind of story would this be? Well, if you read it straight through, it's a fantastic story. I mean, it's just a story of life and hope. It's a tremendous story. But sometimes, like I said, in the movies, we look at the end. Sometimes it's okay. It's legal if you want to look at the end of a book, see if you like the rest of it. And so the end of the book, it's in your notes. In John 20, verse 30 and 31, it says, Jesus performed many other signs in the presence of his disciples. Now, when you read through the Gospel of John, you're going to see a lot of incredible stories. Just to think, there were more things that he didn't include. He's included so much, but there's more. Wow. Yes, there's a lot more. But he doesn't include it all. But these things, he said, are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. It's all about the name. It's all about the Messiah. It's all about Jesus. And so what do you see in the Gospel of John? Jesus, 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 Jesus. It'd be like going to church and saying, all we hear about is Jesus. And John would say, good job. Because that's all we should be hearing about. Because if Jesus is what John's saying he is, then you can believe anything. You can have life. Anything, anyway, at any time. You can believe and have hope anytime. So that's how he ends the book. Well, there's another part in his book that you have to hear. Because he was not only a very good apostle, he was the only apostle that's recorded that saw up close Jesus die. John is at the crucifixion of Jesus. And he writes this in John 19. He says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, that's Mary, so Mary, his mother, is there. His mother's sister is there. Mary, the wife of Clopas, is there, and Mary Magdalene is there. So there's 4 women mentioned. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved, who would that be? That's John. He's identifying himself. Standing nearby, he said to his mother, dear woman, here is your son, and to the disciple, here is your mother. Now, I didn't read that right, and I'm not trying to be an actor. I'm not trying to be overly dramatic, but you have to understand history, and a crucifixion is the most horrible of deaths. Not just because they put nails in his hands, that's one thing. If you've grown up like I grew up as an asthmatic child, I like breathing. And there were times I couldn't get my breath at night. I panicked. I couldn't get my breath. That's a scary thing. And medical experts tell us about this crucifixion. The nails, yes, they were driven in. And they believe his feet were crossed, nails through his feet. And for him to breathe, he had to push up on his feet just to breathe, because the lungs, like this, he can't breathe. There's no breath. Well, when he speaks, you have breath. You have to breathe in order to speak. So just to say these words, "Dear woman, here is your son," he's having to push up and utter out words. It's a long part. And what he's saying is, Mom, John. Mom, John. And he looks at John then and says, "Your mother, Mom." And we know that was a moving point for John, because he writes next in his gospel, "From that time on, this disciple took her, Mary, into his home." What happened to Mary after the crucifixion? She spent time with Jesus. Yes, Jesus was in heaven. He spent time with Jesus' closest friend, one of them, John the Apostle. And so that's part of the story. And also, if you're John and you're now with Mary, she's the mother of Jesus, what do you do at night? You're just there around the campfire, around the fireplace, around the light. And they didn't have Hallmark movies back then. So what do? You probably talk a lot. And I'm sure John had questions for her. She shared things about the angel talking to her that maybe nobody else really knows that much. Maybe details that Luke doesn't put in or Matthew doesn't put in for Joseph. Just different things. And then Jesus, when he was born, we know a little bit. He was born as a baby. And next time he appears, it's age 12. What happened in those years? John may have heard what happened in those years. And then the next time we see Jesus, from 12 to 30, 18 years elapse. And then we see him, and then his life of ministry begins for 3 years, and he's killed. And then dies, raised on the third day. And it's that point that I want to bring to you, is that, yes, it was a dark world. And even they probably talked about Herod killing the babies. They probably talked about Herod eventually not living. They talked about the fact that it was dark, dark, dark. But in that darkness, something happened. John saw something very special. He began to see and realize who Jesus really was. Who was he? And that's what happens in the Bible. We go with the light coming on. The light starts appearing. And in John 1, which was read by the Advent wreath already, but let me just repeat it. He says, John 1, this is now his Christmas story. It's the birth of Jesus, all right? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that had been made. Now that's the Christmas story. But he skips the manger scene. He skips the actual birth, and he does something incredible. He gives us the message of the birth. And here comes the message. He says, because this word is mentioned here, word. It says the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We know this is Jesus. There's no doubt about this. He's talking about Jesus using the idea of logos in the Greek, and he's emphasizing something special. But he says in verse 4 and 5, and this is in your notes, you can put in the blanks. It says, in him was life, and life was the light of all mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. The darkness did not win. In the midst of the greatest darkness in history for the Jewish people, the darkness did not win. And that says something to me at this Christmas time, that the darkness does not win. Instead, because of the resurrection of Jesus, because of the fact that he's alive, there's tremendous light and life in us. Of all people, we should be the most alive because, see, we don't die. Oh, we quit breathing, and they'll bury the body or cremate the body. But we don't die. We live. It's called we win. We win. There's no loss. Believe in Jesus. If you're not a Christian, don't leave here today without taking care of that. Believe in Jesus in your life. Because, see, the fact is, we win, they lose. Who's they? Caesar, who ruled when Jesus was born, he's gone. Tiberius, ruling when Jesus was crucified, abandoned his throne and died as a paranoid recluse. They took his body and threw it in the Tiber River, which they did with common criminals. He was gone. Nero tried to crush the church. He took his own life. So much for the great guys. We're talking about the heroes, those who died with Jesus, those who died as martyrs. You read the stories of the martyrs, and they said they died with a smile on their face. Now, what kind of an idiot is that? People saw their children die. They weren't rejoicing. They didn't want pain, but they knew their child was what? Alive in heaven. They knew that. They believed it because John saw a dead man. He saw a man die. He saw them bury him. He knew he was buried. He saw that man come back to life. His name was Jesus. He saw that man more than once. He talked to his mother. He realized this is a real thing. This guy came back to life, and what he talked about, the resurrection is real. Jesus ascended, and John told the enemies one time, you can try and shut me up, but I must say and talk about what I've seen and what I've heard, because what he was saying, in Jesus, we win. In Jesus, there's victory. Pastor Ken closed the sermon last week talking about the resurrection, and there's two words that represent the resurrection. And what were the two words? I know you remember this. Okay, what were the two words? Well, first one was what? I heard it. Victory. Is that what you said? Yes, victory. And the other one is what? Hope. That's what you said, wasn't it? Yes, hope. Okay, victory and hope. Those are the two words. Now, just so I'll warn you of this. Pastor Ken's not here today, but I texted him this morning because they're in New York City, and I just asked him, which church did you choose? He wasn't sure where he was going to church today. We are going to have one maybe tired, but very inspired pastor when he gets back. You know where he's today? In a church that seats 3,000 packed with people. They sing like you can never believe how they sing. It's called the Brooklyn Tabernacle Church. That's where he went to worship this morning. It's an incredible place. Been there. I cried during the service. I'm sure he probably coughed once or twice, but probably cried a little bit too. It's emotional because here's people who've come out of poverty, they've come out of horrible, it's a bad place. I'm saying all Brooklyn is, but where we were was a bad place. And these people walking in, they had the light of life in them. They won. They walked in there with hope. Regardless of what's going on, it doesn't matter. The best is yet to come. And the one thing about Tim Tebow's book is, yes, he got cut by teams in the NFL, but he's learning the best is yet to come, because if you have Jesus in your life, you have hope. I don't care what's going on with you in your marriage, in your work, or whatever. There is hope because Jesus said you're believing. And if somebody dies today, which does happen, and if they're a Christian, yes, we have tears, but we can also rejoice. They're home. They're home, and we're going to see them again someday. And that brings me to the point in the message where I would say, yes, that is our hope. He saw the light. And that is our hope from heaven. I put my chair here today that I use at home. It's a rocking chair, you can see. And some people have asked me through the years, it's been 60 years now that my mom has been gone. They said, do you ever think about that? I just smile. Yeah. I say, yeah. They said, is Christmas Eve hard for you? I said, oh, we celebrate a lot, and not really. I'm excited for Christmas Eve, but it's different. I'm different. I'm not holier than thou now. I'm just sharing with you my heart. So here I am. I'm inviting you to the Buckley home. Now, I clarified that in the first service. My wife was here. I said, they're not all coming, okay? Just don't worry about it. But right now, we're going to go to the Buckley home. I'm sitting here, and what has happened is we've come from the Christmas Eve service, whether 3 o'clock or 5 o'clock, it doesn't matter. You come. We're going to go home, and I know what's going to be on the table when we get there, tons of food. Well, we have all these teenagers, and they're going to eat the whole thing, and we get a little bit. And so all that food is there. We're going to eat and nibble, and there's gifts around the tree, and the little ones, you know what they're looking at, the gifts. Okay, we're going to open those gifts soon. Yay! This is a tradition. We do it on Christmas Eve for the exchange to gifts. And so we're sitting there. Our house is not big. If you've been in our home, you know it's not a large house. And so I will sit in this chair, and that means when I sit in this chair, it means, okay, things are about to begin. We're going to have our lead up to the time of opening the gifts. But we first start with, we'll maybe sing a Christmas song. We'll read from Luke 2, 1 through 20. Sometimes I read it. Sometimes as the patriarch of the family, I'm the eldest, and so I read it. My wife has read it. Different ones will read it. One year I decided I'm going to recite it, and it's fun just to recite 20 verses, and my grandchildren looking at me like, granddad's just quoting the Bible. You know, it's just cool. And it's just one of those things, our lights are dim. We calm everything down. Lighting can do that. It can calm things down. And so, and if you ask me, am I thinking about my mom or our baby? It comes to my mind. Yeah, it does, honestly. You say 60 years later? Yeah. And the beauty is that there's still I miss her. God has given me tremendous gifts, and I went through a lot of things after that. To deal with that, that's another series of sermons. I won't go into that. But just to say, as I sit here now, this year, I can recall not long ago, I did something that I wanted to do. I don't do it all the time, but that was a good time to do it, I felt. I just decided I would slow things down, and I would add something that year about teaching our family, the adults. We always need to learn and be reminded, as well as the kids. And down to it, we've got 2-year-old, we got small. They may not remember all these things, but we'll tell them again at times. And here's what I said that one year. I said, some of you know that my mom, be your great-grandma, died when I was 10 years old. And, of course, the ones closest to 10, they listen carefully. And you may wonder, do I think about that ever again? And I said, yes, I do. But I have another thing that I wanted to add, that our grandchildren, or they may give me gifts, our children, and what does Granddad want for Christmas? What does Dad want for Christmas? And I honestly can say, I don't know. Because Christmas, I don't know what to ask for. I have so much already, but things really don't mean much to me. Because I learned something when I was 10 years old. The treasures of life are the people around you. Everything else is gravy. Not a lot of gravy here, yes. But life, and I told him that year, I want to thank you for the gifts you're going to give tonight. To me, I want to say thank you. I love you. But if you wanted to ask me what I really want for Christmas, I said, I don't want anything, because my gifts are here right now. Already opened up, breathing, smiling. I love every one of you with a love that I can't explain. And I'm cherishing this moment because I don't know if we have another moment. It happens that fast. And so I treasure this moment. And so thank you for being so special. I don't know if I'll be here another moment. I'm not being dramatic, I'm just being honest. It happens so fast. But because I love Jesus, you know where I'll be. Because you love Jesus, I know where you'll be. And we're going to have the greatest party in heaven you could ever imagine with Jesus. We had a wonderful time 3 years ago in New York as a family. Nothing compared to what's coming. That's why I want all of us in heaven together, all 29 and more. And we're also taking a busload with us. If you want to go and you haven't accepted Jesus, get on the bus today. But I just say that to let you know that we're going to move into our communion time now, that this is really the moment. This is Jesus' time. This is his moment. This is his day. This is, the message is all about him. And he is the light of the world. And the light of the world means we win. The light of the world means we win, we win, we win, we win. How many like to lose? I don't. I'm a Chicago White Sox fan, a Bear fan, and I'm struggling right now. But as a Christian, I'm excited because I know we win, and I know people die, but they're going to heaven. I'm excited that they're with him. I don't say, oh, I'm glad he died. I'm glad he died. I'm glad the baby died. No, I'm not at all. That hurts inside. I understand all that. But I'm so glad when people believe are with the Lord, because my mom's with the Lord. I know that. And God gave me a great stepmother who became a real mom to me, and all that. I know that. But I just want to know that we win. And if you're going through despair in your life, it doesn't matter what it is, at work, in your marriage, whatever it is, there is hope because Jesus is alive. And Tim Tebow would say it, I say it, the best is yet to come. But I can't see it. You don't see it. You walk with Jesus through dark times, and he'll lead you to the light because he is the light. Follow him, be with him, and don't ever let go. And for you teenagers, hang on to that with your life. Choose him now. Make that choice, and that choice will make you. And that's what I say today as we move into our communion time. Cling to Jesus. Love him. Thank him right now. You're going to take some grape juice, and that reminds us of the blood that he shed. You're going to take a wafer, reminds us of the body that he gave for us. And that's called life. Because of that, you live. You live forever. And now, you have hope. Regardless of what you face, don't let the world darken you. You be the bright and shining light with Jesus in you, and thank him for that. And if you're without Jesus today, during the time that we're having this communion, come up to the front, and I'd love to talk with you. Don't leave this place without talking about having Jesus in your life. It means your life. It means everything. Let's pray, and as we pray, we're going to be in a time of prayer as communion is passed. Partake of that, and then closing will be a song that will lift our hearts because it will remind us that Jesus is the light of the world. Father, thank you for sending your son, Jesus. And Lord Jesus, we love you so much because you love us so much, and you are present today. Thank you for loving John the Apostle so much that he was able to communicate to us. We win, and the best is yet to come. If we gain nothing else from this message today, may we be reminded by the simple truth that because of the resurrection, because of life, we can have life. We can believe in that and have life in the name of Jesus, and we know we win. Nothing will defeat us. Nothing. And when we have difficulties in this life, and we don't know what tomorrow brings, we don't know what the job brings, we don't know what our marriage brings, we don't know, but we know that if we cling to you and follow you and make that choice in our life, the best is yet to come. Thank you for people like Tim Tebow and others who have faced some dark times, but are testimonies that the best is yet to come, and we win. Bless us in this communion time, and as we think about Jesus as the light of the world, Lord Jesus, brighten our lives today, brighten our world today with the fact that we have victory and we have hope. And nobody, Satan cannot take that. Nothing he can do can damage that at all. We cling to you today with our lives. I pray that for our children here today, for our teenagers, for our young adults, for those middle-aged people, for those classics here today, everyone of every age. May we celebrate with you, Lord Jesus, life, and may this Christmas be the best Christmas ever because we know our gifts that are precious to us are those that we love. We'll receive other gifts and give other gifts, but that's the gift. Jesus, you gave us that gift in yourself. We love you for it, and we celebrate that in this communion time. It's our prayer in your name. Amen.